It is my absolute pleasure to introduce in this People and Purpose video today, Michael Bungay Stanier, who is the founder and senior partner of Box of Crayons, a company that helps organizations all over the world do less good work and more great work. Welcome, Michael.
So glad to be here. Thanks for having me, Esther.
Fantastic. It's a great privilege to have you, and we want to talk to you about your work in general and this notion of great work, but particularly we know that you've written a couple of books, well, a number of them by now. One of them is Do More Great Work, which is one of the topics I'd like to ask you about, but also you have a brand new book around the coaching habit.
I do.
And of course, there's no wonder, because Box of Crayon is probably best known for teaching managers how to do coaching in just 10 minutes.
Right, that's been our real focus recently, and the new book, and I know we'll get into this, but the new book really draws on our experience of teaching over 10,000 managers how to do practical coaching so they can coach in 10 minutes or less. And if you're ever thinking to yourself, I could do with a little working less hard but having more impact, then I think coaching is a secret sauce to getting there, and the book hopefully offers some good tactics around how you move from good idea to action around that.
Perfect. I would really like you to tell us a little bit more about how coaching works, but also some managers might be listening to this now and thinking 10 minutes, surely that's impossible. For sort of broader context, you talk a lot about this notion of great work as against bad and good work. Can you tell us a little bit about those distinctions?
Sure. So this is the framework for that first book you mentioned, Do More Great Work. And it's a really simple model, but I think it's quite powerful. And here's how to think about it, Esther. Everything you do, everything falls into one of three different buckets. There's either bad work, good work, or great work. So here's the kind of two-sentence summary of each of those three types of work. So bad work, the mind-numbing, soul-sucking, life-crushing, oh my God, this is my life and I'm doing this sort of work. So if you have too many emails, too many meetings, too much bureaucracy in your life, you will know what I'm talking about. And my bet is that's everybody who's listening and watching at the moment. Good work is best summarized as your job description. So it's about being productive and efficient and getting things done. And, you know, your boss likes you for doing good work and your organization likes you for doing good work. So it's important. But good work also keeps you a little bit stuck in a familiar rut, a comfortable rut. And in my experience, when you see people doing good work, sure, they're busy, sure, they're stressed, sure, they're working hard, but they're not really having as much impact as they would like to have, and they're not doing work that feels as meaningful as they'd like to be. Right. And then the final type of work is great work, and we've kind of given you a clue what that is. I think of great work as the work that has more impact and the work that has more meaning. So it kind of balances what your organization wants you to be doing, which is work that has impact. So what's the really strategic, important work that will make a difference? But it's also work that you care about. So kind of work that engages you, work that's meaningful for you, work that has purpose. And you're trying to find that sweet spot between what your organization wants and what you want, meaning and purpose. Meaning and impact.
Mm-hmm. Great. And what do you see as some of the key barriers for managers actually doing more great work?
Well, that's
so
a great
what
question.
Keeps us in bad work or good work?
Yeah. Well, you know, it's interesting because when you ask people that, a lot of them go, well, it's the bad work that kills you. And I'm like, well, it's kind of the bad work. Sure, we all want to eliminate as much of that as possible. But the real seduction happens with good work, because good work is never ending. You know, you're like, I just try and get through all my emails. I try and attend all the meetings that are expected of me. And I come to the conclusion that everybody has about 20% more good work than they could possibly do. And so then you're going, okay, well, if good work and the way the good work fills up your life is proving to be the big barrier, what do you need to try and shift out of that? And I think you need three things. I think you need focus, courage, and resilience. So focus, you need to actually have some insight about what you care about, what lights you up, what work matters to you. Because if you don't know that, then it's really hard for you to find what your great work might be. You also need focus to look around and go, where is there in my organization or in my responsibility work that could be my great work? Because you need to kind of, you know, if you go, well, my great work is painting pictures, that's not going to fly in most organizations. So you've also got to look for the opportunities in your own organization, and not recognizing opportunities to do that is another barrier. Then the other barrier is around courage, because it takes a degree of courage to say yes to doing more great work. Because, the question that's at the heart of great work, it's also a question that appears in the new book, The Coaching Habit, is what are you going to say no to so you can say yes to the work that matters? And if you're saying no to something, it means you're saying no to someone. And that's hard because we want to be nice. We want people to like us. And we tend to have a default yes as an answer. So there's a real question around, which is, so what are you going to say no to? And it's not even saying no to other people. Sometimes it's saying no to yourself. I once heard strategy defined as strategy is saying no to the stuff you want to say yes to. So you have to say no to yourself as well as to other people. And then the third barrier is a lack of resilience. So to do great work, you need resilience, because there are some times, Esther, when you're doing great work and you are just in the zone, you're lit up, everything's flowing, you're like, this is perfect. This is what I signed up for in the first place. But there are other times when you doubt yourself, you feel lost, you feel the imposter syndrome, like, I'm just making this stuff up. I hope nobody asks me what's really going on. And it takes a degree of resilience when you get off the path, when you get knocked down, to find your way back, to stand up and continue the journey to do great work.
Fantastic. I'm sure that from your practice, having worked with so many, in fact, thousands of managers, can you give us some examples of what that really impactful great work looks like? So if people do gather the focus, the courage and the resilience, what can be achieved in, today's corporate organizations?
That's a hard question for me to answer because it is personal to everybody.
Right.
So everybody looks at their workload and goes, this is what I think my great work might be. So let me turn it back to you and go, okay, Esther, you know this model. We've talked about this before. When you think about good work versus great work, at the moment, where would you say your great work is? What's calling you there?
For me, it's training, and it's working with people and seeing the light bulb come on when, particularly, and again, we've spoken about this before, particularly when they recognize the value of talking about strengths and taking positive approaches. That's really where I see, when you see those eyes light and people go, oh, that makes sense. And absolutely, right, I could do something with this. That's my kind of great work.
If you're doing that great work and you're doing it at the best of your ability, you're fully committed to it, you're showing up as the best version of yourself, you're designing training and experiences that absolutely pulled out people's strengths so that they were able to operate from that, what impact would that have on the organizations you work with?
Or, in one of the previous People&Purpose interviews, we talked about an organization setting out to be as happy as Denmark. And it's sort of movement in that direction where managers feel confident, comfortable, capable, and they're doing right by their people so their people feel good about themselves, their work, their place in the organization.
And if managers are feeling that good about themselves and they're having that impact on their people and they're feeling that good and that confident, then what's the impact on the organization?
It's a combination of productivity and happiness, isn't it? And you can define happiness as you like, but that feeling that people have a good sense of belonging and a good sense of kind of personal value and contribution.
Right. So
and organizational results.
So for me, and I'm going to put words in your mouth, but I'm going, so you're, part of your commitment is going, I'm trying to make organizational life fulfilling and human for people.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Right. That's the impact great work can have, but that's just your great work. Other people listening in will have a different angle, a different take, something else that lights them up. But you're looking to try and go, if I'm doing this and I'm doing it fully and I'm really committed to it, you get that sense of impact into the world. But also, I can imagine if you were doing that as much as you wanted to do, what impact would that have on your own sense of purpose and your own sense of meaning?
And it's the work that lights you up, isn't it?
Exactly.
It's the work that's joyous, really.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's where you get to that combination of work that's meaningful and work that has impact. And you've just articulated that beautifully.
Yeah. Well, there you go. But then I understand that that's not always the reality. And and there is this pull of the good work in particular, as well as the bad work. So how can coaching in particular help managers move away from doing too much, especially bad work, but also good work, and doing more great work? How can coaching have
Right.
an impact there?
Well, I think, if you come back to great work needing focus and courage and resilience, I think coaching is one of the best ways to help people access that in themselves. Um, uh, Not least because when you're talking about coaching, you're talking about a fundamental shift of behavior from less advice giving and more curiosity. And when you are giving somebody advice, it really works far less than you think it would do. I mean, you feel better about it when you're the manager or the leader giving advice because you feel in control. You feel like you're adding value. You feel like you're the smart one in the relationship. There's a bunch of things that kind of stroke your ego about giving advice. The price you pay is A, you become a bottleneck for your team. B, you become a bit overwhelmed because you're trying to give everybody advice. You're trying to do everybody else's work for them. C, your advice doesn't really work that well. Most people don't actually follow other people's advice or find it particularly useful. And D, you're effectively disempowering the other person. Because if you're feeling in control, if you're feeling like you got the status in the relationship, you kind of rank higher than anybody else, then they feel less of that. So it has an impact on that. So I think if you can come to a conversation with a more, I'm not even going to call it coaching, it's like being more coach-like, which is really just being a little more curious, asking a few good questions. And some of the key questions in the book, we only share 7 essential questions. So it's not saying you have to be a coach or you have to master 1,000 questions. A few good questions will take you a long way down the path of being an effective coach. And I think if you're asking those questions, a lot of them actually towards that piece around what's your focus? What's the real challenge? What's the impact you want to have? How can you show up to do great work?
What you're asking people to do is really rethink their role in the organization, their role in that
Right,
relationship with the people they work with,
right.
and the kind of the fundamentals of that interaction. What's your job and what's theirs?
Right. There's a definition of coaching that seems to be popular. It certainly seems to kind of resonate with people when I share it. It's from John Whitmore, who's a UK-based senior executive coach, one of the kind of grandfathers of the coaching profession. And he says coaching is about helping to unlock somebody's potential. But he also says it's the difference between teaching them and helping them learn.
Yeah.
And you can argue that it's a bit of an artificial distinction, but I think teaching them can be summed up by I give them advice, I tell them what to do.
Yeah.
Helping them learn is about helping them expand their own capacity, their own potential. Another metaphor is this. Um, Imagine a picture of a person staring into a fire, right? The fire is the thing that needs to be fixed, the thing that needs to be put out or built up or banked or whatever you need to do with the fire. And often when we're working with somebody, it's all about the fire. They come going, it's a fire. And you go, put it out this way or build it up that way, whatever it might be. But actually, the coaching and the leadership that has an impact is when you move the focus from the fire to the person who's dealing with the fire. And the third question in the book is the focus question, which is what's the real challenge here for you? And that's written very deliberately like that because one of your options is to say to the person, okay, so what's the challenge here? And if you ask them that, they will talk about the fire. The fire is too high, the fire is too low, help me fix the fire. If you talk about what's the real challenge here for you, that's by adding for you on the end of the question, that's where the focus shifts to the person. That's where the insights about themselves come from. It's like, oh, my challenge is I'm scared of fire, or I just don't know I don't know where to find the wood to build up the fire. And suddenly they actually start learning rather than you just teaching them how to build a fire. They actually start learning about themselves, they start learning about the situation, and that's where that growth occurs.
And that's where you're building something, aren't you? You're building something in the individual, but actually you're building capacity and learning in the organization.
Right. And self-sufficiency.
Right.
And that's really important because if you're a typical manager and leader, you already have enough to do without having to do everybody else's work for them. So you're trying to create independence and autonomy and self-sufficiency in your team, not just for their sake, because it does help them, it keeps them more engaged and helps them to have more successful careers and all of that good stuff, but for your sake, because you've got other things to do, you've got your own job to do.
Yeah. So what would you specifically suggest for leaders who are thinking, okay, I can see the value of this. I do want some of that autonomy and self-sufficiency.
Yeah.
What would be some of the first steps that you would recommend people take?
Well, for me, the starting point, and this is actually the first chapter of the book, is about understanding how to change your behavior.
Hmm.
Because there's one thing to, I mean, if you talk to almost everybody and you go, coaching, it's a good thing. There's very few people who go, you know what, I'm opposed to coaching. I think it's wrong. I think it's terrible. I think we should do no coaching whatsoever. Everybody intellectually gets what coaching is about. The thing is, in practice, nobody really does it. Everybody, keeps essentially telling people what to do, or maybe they've got a little cunning and they know how to make it sound like they're coaching them. And they go, "Hey, have you thought of?" Which, of course, isn't even a question. It's just advice with a question mark tacked on the end of it. So part of what I'd encourage people to do is start by just becoming a little aware of, look how quickly you want to move to advice giving and solution providing, because it is insane how fast it happens. I mean, somebody starts talking, you don't really know who they are, you don't really know the situation, you don't really know what's going on, but you're pretty sure you know what they need to do to fix it. So there's just this trigger we have
Mm.
about leaping into advice giving, and it's because it's a habit.
Yeah.
It's because we've been doing it for so many years, so many times, that it becomes our default response.
And I think it's probably fair to say that it comes from a good place, right?
Of
It
course
comes
it
from
does.
wanting to be helpful.
Exactly.
And then there's all sorts of stuff about status and things. But ultimately, it is about trying to be helpful.
Oh, absolutely. This is how I've been taught to add
Yeah,
value, to be helpful,
indeed.
to help my people thrive. And that's a good
Just so
intention,
happens.
but
Yeah.
it just doesn't actually work as well
Yeah.
as you think. I'm not saying never give
No,
advice. There's a
absolutely.
place for advice. If somebody comes to you and goes, where's the file folder? You don't want to be going, so, how are you feeling about the file folder? That's not a good
Right.
use of anybody's time. You know, there's times where you go, the file folder's over there.
Mm.
Perfect. But it's about just slowing down the rush to advice more times than you would think.
So this sort of switch to more curiosity and less advice
Yeah.
is one of the crucial things, and noticing when we're
It's the
jumping into
fundamental
advice.
behavior change that we're talking about here. A little less advice, a little more curiosity, just as you said.
Yeah.
The thing is, you've now trained your people to come to you for the answer. So it's going to take some courage to defy expectations. They come to you and go, "Hey, Esther, how do I do the thing?" And they're like, Esther always tells us the answer. That's perfect. I don't have to think.
Mm.
I just do what she tells me to do. And then suddenly you've changed the way you're behaving, and you go, I could probably tell you how to do that, but let me just ask you before I do, what's the real challenge here for you? And they're like, wait, what? You're making me do the work? And every part of you is going, oh my God, they don't like this. They want me to tell them the answer. And it takes some courage and resilience to resist that
Mm.
and say, for my sake and for your sake and for the organization's sake, we're shifting the way we work together.
Yeah. And you can do this in 10 minutes.
Well, that's my belief. And at the start of this conversation, you said, well, there's some managers who are going, 10 minutes, that's impossible.
Right.
But I would flip that and I would say, if coaching takes longer than 10 minutes for you, that's impossible because you already have a completely full schedule.
Mm.
You don't have a whole bunch of space kind of going, well, I wish I had something to do here because I've got a 3 hour uninterrupted block where I've got nothing to do. Everybody is overwhelmed, overscheduled, overcommitted. And if you want to make coaching a powerful part of the way you lead, if you can't do it in 10 minutes or less, you just don't have time to do it. And the other key thing to be thinking about here is the insight that what we're doing here is not adding to your current workload. I mean, if you think coaching is additive, that's also going to be a road of no return. That's not going to work for anybody. So the way to be thinking about this is how do you transform some of your current interactions so they are more coach-like, so they're more infused with curiosity. If people want to pick up the book, so that you're using some of the 7 essential questions there. And when you understand that you're transforming the way you work, and that's when you see how you can do this in 10 minutes or less.
I picked up on that on purpose because I think that's a really important barrier in people's minds. They think, I can give advice in 30 seconds.
Right.
If I engage in a different sort of a conversation, that's going to take a lot longer. So
Right.
I think the 10 minutes is actually a really powerful message, because it says, we're not saying to you that you're swapping a 30-second advice, here's the answer.
For a 45-minute conversation on a
Precisely.
therapist's couch, because that doesn't work.
Yeah.
And in fact, my take on it is bolder, which is to say you actually get to work less hard
Right.
and have more impact if you're more coach-like, because sure, it only takes you 30 seconds to give advice. The challenge is you're giving advice on the thing that isn't the real challenge, and you're giving advice which people don't really listen to. So it's like, yeah, it's a really efficient way to do something that doesn't work. Hooray. Whereas if you spend like 3 or 4 or 5 minutes getting to the heart of what the real challenge is, then actually often they figure out what to do from there. You don't need to give them advice, and they're now working on the real challenge. So it takes a little longer, but you get the real thing sorted. So that saves you time for sure.
Absolutely. And of course, you're building that capability in people to work it out for themselves next time.
Right.
So
Exactly.
you don't keep giving the same piece of advice over
Exactly.
and over and over.
Exactly.
People. Right. And I really like this idea alongside the 10 minutes that you've built a book around just 7 questions. It isn't hugely complex. It is very targeted, very focused, and quite.
Well, there's a quote from I think his name is John Randall Holmes. He's an American jurist, so on the senior superior court in the US. He's dead now, but he had this wonderful quote. He said, "Look, I wouldn't give a fig for simplicity on this side of complexity, but I would give my right arm for simplicity on the other side of complexity." And that's what I strive for. I'm like, how do I make stuff that is complex and complicated and make it practical and useful and simple and straightforward for people? And that's what I have strived to do with this book, and I love the fact that you're playing that back to me. So thank you.
That's great. So would you mind sharing? You've talked about what's the main challenge for you here, as one of the core
Question number 3,
right?
Yeah, exactly.
Any other questions that you might want to share that are particularly pertinent at this point, or might encourage people to pick up the book?
I love all these questions. I don't have children of my own, but if these 7 questions were my children, I'd be like, how do you choose between your 7 children? So let me ask you, which question kind of catches your ear, catches your eye? Which one do you particularly like?
Actually, it probably was the challenge for you. That's the one, because I think it is that question, the other side of complexity. We're really comfortable with what's the challenge, kind of spiraling into a digging around a problem. And this idea of just adding 2 words to the end of it turns it into something completely different. It's a perfect example of what you just described, the simplicity on the other side of complexity.
Nice. Yeah, very nice. Okay, so what's your second ranking question now? I'm putting you on the spot, I know.
I think, and I might not be quite quoting this right, but it would be the one around how can I help you at the end.
Lovely. Yeah, how can I help? Yeah, we call that the lazy question.
Yeah.
And I know people, when they hear how can I help, it doesn't sound like you're encouraging laziness there, because it sounds like you're going, give me more work, please. How can I help? But here's the way I want to frame it as a lazy question. It's a bit counterintuitive. When somebody comes to you and goes blah 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 blah, because you're in advice giving, solution providing mode, because you want to leap in and add value, what most of us do is we just go, oh, I know what they need, I know what they want, I'm just gonna start giving it to them, because that's what they're desperate for. And you just leap into action, and it all plays out just the way we've been talking about. And we're trying to slow down that rush to action. So when somebody comes into your office or sends you an email or calls you up and goes blah, 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 and you can feel every fiber of your body kind of twitching, wanting to leap in and fix things and help them out, rather than doing that, this is your new habit. You go, how can I help? Or a more blunt version of this, which I like as well, is what do you want from me?
Right, yeah.
And you can ask that in a way that doesn't sound aggressive. I love adding the phrase out of curiosity at the front of a question because it makes it sound just less heavy as a question. So you go, okay, I think I understand everything that's going on. So out of curiosity, what do you want from me here?
Yeah.
So at the start of the book, we talk about the new habit formula. It's a really simple way to build a new behavior, which is what you need to be thinking about. How do I change my behavior here? And the new habit formula is when this happens, which is the context, instead of, which is about the old habit, I will, and that's when you define the new habit in 60 seconds or less. So the new habit here, when Esther comes into my office and goes, Michael, how do I do the blah, 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 as she always does, instead of giving her the answer and hoping that she'll just go away and leave me alone, I will ask, Esther, I think I understand the situation. What do you want from me here? Just out of curiosity, what do you want from me? And that's a new behavior, a new habit that I'm building. But what it's going to force Esther to do, or whoever the person is in your habit, is it's going to make them articulate a specific request. And when they make that request, here's the thing that's going to relieve lots of people listening in. You don't have to say yes to it. You're allowed to say yes. You're allowed to say, I can't do that. What else could I do? Or I can't do that, but I could do this. Or you could say, look, maybe can you make a more specific request, or not exactly this, but something else? So you get then to have a negotiation about what actually gets done.
Yeah.
But what it's doing is it's forcing them to make a clear request. And secondly, it's allowing you to not rush to action and then have a more thoughtful, mindful response to the actual request, the actual help that they're looking for.
Yeah. And I love this because it helps with that ownership piece, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
Rather than someone walking into the manager's office and dumping something on their desk and
Right.
saying, it's yours now. Here's a
Right.
problem. It's yours now. It actually says, it's still mine.
Right.
And I need some support with it, which is a very different dynamic.
It is. I mean, there's a metaphor. This isn't mine, but it's a really powerful metaphor, and I can't remember who wrote it first. It might have shown up in the Harvard Business Review or something, which is, people come into your office, literally or metaphorically, and they're carrying a monkey. And you're like, you know what? Look at the monkey, admire the monkey, talk about the monkey, stroke the monkey, do whatever you need to do with the monkey. But when they leave your office, make sure they take the monkey with you. What you don't want is a whole lot of other people's monkeys hanging out in your office. And that's really what we're driving for here. A monkey-free office. You got enough monkeys of your own.
The recommended read, The 1 Minute Manager and the Monkeys. Yeah, absolutely.
Right. Yeah.
And yeah, it's that ownership bit, isn't it? And those questions really help keep the ownership where the issue actually needs to stay.
Yeah.
Perfect. So if you were to leave our viewers, listeners with some specific pieces of advice around building a coaching habit, what might those be?
Well, here's my paradox. Because I just spent the last 45 minutes telling people why they shouldn't listen to anybody's advice and you should never give advice. So now you're asking me to give people's advice. It's getting confusing for me. But here's what I would offer up as possible things for people to do, which is step number one is notice. Try and notice. Try and become more sensitive to what your default reaction is. Notice how quickly you want to give the answer. Secondly, it would be understand how a habit is built. And we talked about the new habit formula. So go back, listen to that again, write down the 3 steps when this happens instead of I will, and start understanding how that works to build new habits. And then thirdly, I would say pick one situation that you would like to be different. A person, a situation, really specific, not some sort of generalized, I will just do more coaching. It's in my one-to-one meeting with Bob. It's in my team meeting with Simona. It is in my vendor conversation with XYZ vendor. It is in my monthly meeting with my own boss. Pick a situation where you're not behaving the way you would like to behave, where you think it would be better to be a little more coach-like rather than giving advice. And then write out your new habit. So what I would love people to take away from this is one very specific habit that will help them be a little more curious and give a little less advice, perhaps using one of the 7 powerful questions that are in the coaching habit book.